Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for watching my show, William Wallace for America. As you all know, I'm going around the state, sometimes virtual, sometimes in person, to be able to find out what's coming up in the next Louisiana Legislative Session. And if you're watching on my national program, I think it's our states' rights are important because watch what those other states are doing when it comes to freedom, liberty, and fiscal responsibility, like Louisiana is trying to do. And let's find ways to fix our country. With me today is State Representative Alan Seabaugh. How are you doing today, Representative?
I'm doing great. How are you this afternoon?
I'm doing good. I appreciate coming on. I got to tell you, my quick plug for you is you're always known to have smart, conservative, and thoughtful legislation. It's a reputation that people bring up. Sometimes all three of those things, sometimes each one independently about you. And I want to put that light on you a little bit because I think people are going to be impressed with what we got to talk about tonight.
Well, I hope so.
Well, where exactly is your district?
My rep district is in Southern Caddo Parish.
Okay.
Most of South Shreveport, and like I don't live in the city limits. It's the area outside the city limits in the southern part of the parish.
Okay. So on the southern part of where Shreveport is, the parish Shreveport's
Yes.
in?
Yeah, the southern part of Shreveport. Yes.
All right. And I know later we'll be interviewing you later about because you're running for Senate. And after session, I'll bring you on and we'll do a legislative wrap up later and talk about that Senate race because I think you're very important for the state, and I think people need to see more about you. So let's talk about some of that we can't see you right now. Oh, there you are. Let's talk about.
I got a phone call. Sorry.
It's all right. So let's talk about to give people an idea of your past legislation. Well, actually, before that, what did you do before you were a state rep?
Well, I've been an attorney for right at 30 years, and that part hadn't changed. I'm still practicing attorney. Honestly, before going to the legislature, I did your typical dad stuff. I coached softball. I coached football. I was an Indian princess tribe with one of my daughters. I did all the dad stuff. I was on the Little League board, and I coached, and I did all the raising of children. I have 4 daughters. They're all in their 20s now, but they're one grandchild. But I have 4. For 2 years, I had 4 teenage daughters at the same time, and I survived. I had no gray before then, but that's when I went gray. I was just dad, and going all the way back, I've been involved in Louisiana politics most of my life. I worked on campaigns when I was a very little kid. I was a volunteer on the Dave Treen campaign when I was 10 or 11. Wow. And then I was a legislative assistant in the Senate for Ben Baggard, who actually just got inducted in the Louisiana Political Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I
have the distinction of being Ben's last legislative assistant. He ran for U.S. Senate in 1990 and Attorney General in 91. And I was president of the College Republicans at LSU. I was from Shreveport, and I knew my way around North Louisiana. Ben absolutely didn't, being from New Orleans. So he hired me to drive him around the state for 2 years, and I served as his legislative assistant in the Senate. Before that, I actually worked on Bob Livingston's campaign for governor in 1987. I worked briefly with Bush Quayle in 88. So I had a grounding in Louisiana politics from the grassroots level and working all the way up. Went to law school in the early 90s and then jumped right into getting married and raising kids. So I stepped out of the political arena, was always interested. But when I went to run, a lot of people knew me as the Little League coach. They didn't know my past political background. They go, what do you know about politics? Well, actually, quite a bit. It's just not something that had been my focus of the previous 10 years or so. But now I have, again, 4 kids, 2 of which were political science majors. My oldest daughter, Catherine, was executive director of Texas Victory in 2018, which was a party-affiliated re-election super PAC for Ted Cruz for Senate and Abbott for governor. So she was a Trump appointee to the EPA. And so she has a good political background. She actually married former Congressman John Fleming's oldest son. And they have my only grandchild is last name Fleming. So
okay.
John and I share a grandbaby. So, but anyway, so I've won with a pretty good political pedigree. My youngest actually works for Jeff Landry right now. So in the
Okay,
AG's
awesome.
office in Baton Rouge. So they have a little bit of political pedigree, and we're working them through that. But again, long answer to a short question. Prior to becoming a legislator, I did a lot. Again, as a practicing attorney, that part hadn't changed. Some of my volunteer activities and my side things like coaching and little league and all that has morphed into legislating.
I love this. It's like you get this really unique resume, which I think is very important when it comes to serving the public. You know, a lot of people can argue about whether attorneys make good legislators because they're good at law, but of course, some people think it's a good thing. Some people think it's a bad thing. But I think when you look at all your experience before family, during, you know, and you put your family first and your legal experience, I think it makes for some good a good resume builder, I guess, if we're being in the legislature now, fighting
Well,
for
I think
people.
it is. It's well rounded, and you know, your lawyers get a bad rap, and well deserved to a large extent.
Yeah,
But the
some of
fact of the
them, yeah.
matter is, well, the only you know, if you're up against a bad lawyer, you need a good one. And you know,
Right.
there's a lot of bad lawyers out there, but there's also some good ones. And you know, so that's, you know, when it helps. I had an opponent one time who said, "We don't need any lawyers in the legislature. We have enough laws." Well, it's, first of all, that's kind of a dumb argument, but two,
Right.
it's not a bad idea to have somebody there that actually has read them, knows what they say, knows how they interact with each other, and
Hmm.
knows how things work. So I do think lawyers have a bit of a leg up when it comes to showing up in the legislature, even if with no political experience at all, knowing how laws interact with each other and how local, state, and federal laws all kind of work is a great benefit to somebody just walking in the door. And of course, I've been there for 12 years now, but it's you know, there's I think a legal background helped a lot and helped me get up to speed fairly quickly.
And you know what I think also makes a big difference is that your values. You know, you have strong conservative values. And of course, I'm saying this because I know this about you. I've watched you, and I'm familiar with some of your past legislation. But you're fiscally conservative. You've got conservative values, and you're strong about them. You're not wishy-washy about your values. And I think that I think those values and those qualifications supersedes anything about law, your law experience. I think your law experience kind of magnifies your values, if you will.
Well,
Or,
it
or does
makes it
your
easier
values magnify your legal experience?
well, it makes it easier to navigate the process in Baton Rouge. I mean, what
And your
you know,
values.
I have an interesting career path in the legislature because I've been on just about every committee because I did 3 years on the budget committee, and I fought. That was when Jindal was governor, and we fought hard for fiscal responsibility. And I was one of the original fiscal hawks, and we fought for budget control and tried to block the out of control growth of government. And then I moved from there into John Bell's first couple of years. I was on Ways and Means, and that was when we were fighting all the tax increases and all that. And I've interspersed that with several stints on civil law, which is what I do for a living as an attorney, drafting the civil code and all that. Most recently, I'm on criminal justice, which I didn't really want to go on criminal justice when they put me there a couple of years ago.
Mhm.
I'm not a criminal defense attorney. I'm not a criminal lawyer. I've never prosecuted or defended a criminal case. Actually, it's not true. I got appointed on one.
Right.
I didn't do it by choice. But I don't prosecute, and I don't really defend criminal cases. I didn't really want to go on criminal. It's ended up being one of my favorite committees because Louisiana has a lot of problems. It's really not difficult to identify the crime problems in Louisiana. All you got to do is open the door to hear the gunshots.
Right.
Read any
Exactly.
paper in the state. Jeff Landry loves to quote the statistic that of the 10 most dangerous cities in America, 3 of them are in Louisiana.
Yeah.
And you know that's really a list you don't want to be on. But a lot of Louisiana's crime problems, I think, are self-inflicted. And they were started in the legislature 2016, 2017 with the rolling back of the juvenile age and then or rolling up, depending on which way you want to look at it, considering 17-year-olds as juveniles has been devastating to the juvenile justice system in Louisiana. And then the rest of the criminal justice reform has turned into a turnstile of letting criminals out of jail. And what we did is we put a lot of really bad guys on our streets, and then people want to scratch their head and wonder why crime went up. Crime went up because you let them all out of prison. And, but the legislature did that. I was there in 2016, 2017, fighting against all those bills. And I hate to say I told you so, but I was one of the ones saying I told you so at the time. Right. This is a really, really bad idea. And a lot of the bad results that have come of it were entirely predictable at the time. And some of us aren't very surprised at what we're seeing now. And it was predictable. If the legislature creates a problem, the legislature can fix it. And I do think that's our job going forward, is going to be to focus on common sense solutions to some fairly simple problems.
Yes.
If you want to get into the root cause of why does someone commit a crime, you can start with early childhood education and go all the way back. And that's a valid point. It is less expensive to educate a child than to incarcerate them. But those are problems that need to be addressed. There's more immediate problems, like literally opening the doors and removing half of the incarcerated population back onto the streets. That's something the legislature did in 2017 and 2018. And that it I think is a big part of the reason we're in the problem that we're in right now. So, but I've kind of gone through different phases in my legislative career, depending on which committees I was on. Because I didn't come to the legislature planning to be a criminal justice guy. Mm-hmm. It's morphed into that, and I actually really enjoy it. I embrace the role. It's one right now. Currently, it's my favorite committee, and it's one that gets the most of my attention.
It's kind of come back full circle, like you said. In the beginning, you watched the bad legislation go through. You warned everybody about it, and now you're on that committee, and you have a chance to help work on fixing it. But it also, at the same time, gives you another piece of the puzzle, or the last piece of the puzzle, to give you that full experience in the legislative body, to have experienced every committee and be able to put all those pieces together. Well, what kind of let's go to some of your legislation that you had last year. And it's funny because, like, I always look at how many bills get dropped and get filed, and I go, my gosh, we really need more bills. But then when you look at how many bills, fix problems that were created by other bills, we kind of need them, or problems in our community. But what kind of legislation did you pass, or did you have last year?
All right, that actually brings up an interesting scenario. If you look at the last 7 years since John Bell has been governor, I think I lead the state in vetoes. For a while, I was neck and neck with Tony Bacala, but I think I passed him. I get 2 a year on average, including several times bills that passed both houses with no objection, and 105-0, 39-0, John Bell vetoes. I get 2 a year. I think it's just a knee-jerk reaction that he's got. Some very common sense, non-objectionable land title bills. He vetoed an insurance bill that I carried for Jim Donlin one year with no objection and non-controversial. Last year, one of those was a bill. I still can't believe he vetoed this. All it said was churches are entitled to equal protection. That's it. The U.S. Constitution guarantees equal protection of its laws, and it simply said that in Louisiana, churches are entitled to the same protection as secular businesses. And John Bell vetoed it. And we couldn't get a veto. I have no clue. Have you ever had a chance to ask him? No, we don't correspond.
Okay. Well, I guess no, because it sounds like he's got a veto, a veto stamp, but he's got a special veto stamp with Alan Seabaugh's name on it. He goes, "Oh no, here's this one. Let the font is much bigger than the regular veto stamp, right?"
Yeah, that's great. He does. And what I've done is there are things that are very important to my constituents that I get other legislators to sponsor and just don't go to the table. So he doesn't know that it's my bill. but I pass a lot of bills with other legislators' names on it just to avoid the veto. A lot of the bills that have my name on it are ones that I want to fight, like issues that are important to me that I want to have the discussion. I want to be part of the discussion. Like last year, the felon in possession of a firearm. That was removed as part of the criminal justice reform. If you're a convicted felon and you're not supposed to have a firearm and you are in possession of a firearm, that was considered a nonviolent offense. So the felon who's convicted, a felon in possession of a firearm, was getting all the good time credit as a nonviolent offense. Well, I'm working with the Sheriff's Association, worked to reclassify that as a violent crime so that the good time calculation is not available to the felon who commits a crime while using a firearm that he's not supposed to possess in the first place. That's one I put my name on. We fought it and we got it passed. Several other bills passed that didn't necessarily have my name on it. Things that I had some senators, some other state representatives who don't, have the veto magnet that I seem to. That's one of the main things. I am very much looking forward to a new governor in 2024. Because I would like to go into this without having that veto. And look, I have groups that I work with contact me and say, "Can you carry a bill?" And I said, "I'll carry your bill, but you need to know there's a decent chance that it gets vetoed just because it has my name on it." I mean, that is truly how petty John Bel Edwards is. He will veto completely non-controversial legislation just because it has certain legislators' names on it.
I think this is important to note because I think that in the upcoming governor's race, there's going to be a lot of people that don't pay attention to politics. They pay attention only to party and the narratives. And in a case like this, we need to see how bad politics and how ugly it gets in Louisiana. So to tell people, try to look beyond the party, look beyond the narratives that have been created to cover up certain people's actions, and look at these actions that John Bel has done. Like you said, I mean, if it's getting passed overwhelmingly in the legislature, overwhelmingly in the Senate, and those are all have Democrats, and you still get a veto, it has something to say about pettiness, towards you.
And that's all it is. Like in one bill that I carried for the insurance department, it was decreasing regulation. And his veto message said that it was an unnecessary increase in regulation. Well, I don't even think he read it. I mean, it was the exact opposite. It was decreasing regulation that were overburdened. It was really duplicative, and there was two layers, and that were kind of contradictory, and it was clarifying. And he said it's an increase in regulation. Well, I mean, it wasn't. And again, I don't even really think he read it. But it is what it is. The bottom line is he's the most partisan governor Louisiana's ever had. I'm not saying he's the most ideological, but he's certainly the most partisan. Whereas
he comes across nice. He comes across nice. I mean, to most people, he comes across nice. I'm not complimenting him. I'm just saying that the public perceives him as being, the public. Some of the public perceives him as being bipartisan and nice. He crossed party lines. But when you hear what he's doing behind the scenes, like with what you're telling us now, we see that it's anything but.
Yeah, there is nothing remotely bipartisan about John Bel Edwards. He is a partisan Democrat hack and has been since he was in the House. I served 5 years in the House with him. I mean, he's a very, very partisan Democrat and very proud of the fact that he's a partisan Democrat. And so, I mean, he is the most partisan governor Louisiana has ever had.
You shared the House with him. You shared the House with him. Did you ever short sheet his bed in the barracks or something? Is that why he doesn't like you?
No, it was really kind of funny. There was we went head to head a lot, and in fact, there's a picture, and I'm sure at some point you'll talk to Stephen Wagisback. Stephen has a picture on his phone that when I call him, that picture pops up. He's got it saved as my screensaver when I call him, and it's a picture of me at the podium of the House killing one of John Bell's bills, and John Bell seated on the ledge next to it with his head in his hands, just with despair on his face because I was destroying his bill. And so anytime you call Wagisback, that's the picture that pops up. And I'm actually fairly proud of that.
Well, there you go. You killed that bill, and he's going to kill every one of yours ever since. So
Yeah.
before we get started on legislation you've got coming up for this next session, do you have any other ones that happened last session that you're particularly proud of, that we give an example of your ideas or your passions?
I did a lot of technical civil law stuff, some clarifications of the civil code, and trying to move things along that way. But I mean, the criminal justice one, fighting for the felon in possession of a firearm, was probably the big ticket item, along with what I thought was a fairly important religious liberties bill, and the equal protection for churches, which
Yeah, I
again
still can't.
seems like
Yeah,
a
I still can't.
no-brainer.
Yeah, I still
I
can't believe they fought against. That's really just freedom that he basically vetoed.
Well, it's in the U.S. Constitution. So
Right.
the real question is, did we need a bill? But the fact is, we just come out of COVID, where Walmart was allowed to have 300 customers, abortion clinics were allowed to stay open, but the churches were all closed. So if the bill didn't say this, but the meaning of it was, if you're going to allow Walmart to have 300 people, you got to let the churches have 300 people. You
Yeah.
can't treat churches worse than you treat secular businesses, and which, from a legal standpoint, that is the law. I mean,
Right.
one of the things I still do in my spare time is I grade the constitutional law section of the bar exam. And in fact, I finished them over the weekend. I grade the con law section of the bar exam. I know how equal protection works, and that's supposed to be the law already. It just wasn't necessarily in Louisiana because, again, John Bell's just partisan, and he doesn't really care what the law is. And again, he's going to force the abortion clinics to stay open and churches to close. That there's something not right about that picture.
And that's a good example of our national politicians, and president are kind of getting away with a lot of things and usurping our constitution and circumventing it. And the bureaucracies are doing that. And now we see our local politicians and our local governor doing that. It only makes us have to be more aware of our freedoms and liberties. Well, let's talk about this next session coming up. You have some examples of things that you've already filed, or things that you're getting ready to file that you can talk about coming up this next session?
I haven't actually pre-filed anything yet, because we get 5 bills that are non-fiscal, and I'm trying to decide
Correct.
which 5 I'm going to go with. Couple that I'm going to file. One of them is very specific, and it's for a constituent that we created a loophole a couple of years ago when we did the TOPS. I think Representative Broadwater brought a bill to reclassify TOPS. I have a situation where there are some Christian missionaries who are Louisiana residents. They've gone to another country as Christian missionaries to raise their children. And right now, because of how long they've been in the other country, even though they're Louisiana residents, their children are not eligible for TOPS. So I'm bringing a bill to amend TOPS. They actually used to be eligible, but Representative Broadwater's legislation actually took them out. I don't think he meant to do that, but we're trying to put that back in, that if you're working and you're still technically classified as a Louisiana resident, but you're in another country working as a missionary or something along that line, that your children would still qualify for TOPS. That's not going to affect that many people, but it's fairly important to the ones that it does attract. I mean, that it does affect. And so I promised a constituent I would do that. So I'm going to bring that bill. Another one that I'm doing is a creation of a violent crimes task force to study the rise of violent crime in Louisiana. Let's get to the nuts and bolts. Let's look at why violent crime has gone through the roof the last few years. I think I know, but I'm willing to open it up to everybody on both sides. Let's present the evidence, and let's see if we can figure out why violent crime is where it is. But then most importantly, what can we do about it going forward? What is the legislative remedy? What bills can we push in 2024 legislative session? What avenues are available for the legislature to actually push to try to fix the problem? So it's a study of where did we come from? And oh, by the way, does it relate to the 2017 Justice Reinvestment Act or not?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think it does, but I'm willing to have the debate and open it up and let the other side present their evidence to see whether it does or not. And then if so, and most importantly, regardless of where it came from, going forward, what can we do to fix it? I think lowering the juvenile age back to 16 would be huge for the juvenile justice infrastructure in the state. That seems to be a no-brainer that I think everybody in the state except John Bell recognizes. We just simply weren't ready for that move. And, incarcerating 17-year-olds with 11-year-olds has become a disaster
Right.
because of the change in rules with respect to the housing of 17-year-olds. So that's been a disaster. The calculation. I mean, Debbie Villio every year brings her truth in sentencing bill. I think she's bringing a truth in sentencing study commission this year. That's very important. So there's going to be a number of criminal justice bills that we're going to look at going forward. How many of those, other than the task force, I'm not sure how many of those I'm going to offer. I have a Second Amendment bill that I'm looking at that I may bring. But there's a couple of other cleanup bills. That I have one that I'm probably not going to bring, but I've drafted. When the district attorney in Orleans Parish came out and said, we're not going to enforce the abortion law, I have a bill that gives the attorney general original jurisdiction and the state police original jurisdiction to investigate and the AG original jurisdiction to prosecute violation of Louisiana's abortion law, aimed specifically at DAs who just are saying they're going to ignore it. I've worked with the DAs. The DAs Association did not like that bill, and I've worked with them, and they've come out and assured me that he misspoke, that he's backed off of that, that he's not going to take that position going forward. So probably not going to file that bill this year, but we're going to watch what he does, and we'll see if there's anything else that we could address. I had another one that I really liked that I was kind of excited for. I live in rural North Louisiana. We have one of the problems that we have up here that is pervasive is feral hogs. Pigs are a huge detriment to farms. Not only deer hunt, they get in the way of deer hunters, but they mess up farms. They cause millions of dollars of agricultural damage every year. So what I was going to try to do is do what we did to the nutria a couple of years ago and put out a bounty. You bring us a feral hog tail, we'll give you $5. And one of my friends said, "What are you going to call it? To make rednecks rich, Bill?" Because we have millions. But we could, and the question is, the fiscal note's impossible to calculate because we don't know how many hogs we have and we don't know how many that we could kill, but it would be worth it. And that's what I'm still playing with. I'm not sure if I'm going to move it. Representative Frankie Howard brought that bill several years ago and couldn't get it out of committee. I'm not sure if I want to try that or not. But that's one that I was actually excited about when I drafted. I'm not sure if I'm going to move that one or not, but I'm still thinking about it.
That's interesting. $5 a tail. I mean, like, how many are they just cut the tails off? I mean, you have to kill them. I mean, what about $5 a head?
Well, the heads are big. I mean, you try to bring the head
well,
in.
no, I know. I'm just saying that, but the tail doesn't kill them. So if the object doesn't kill them.
That's true. But again, I've never cut the tail off a live pig.
Yeah, give that a shot. But hey, look, there's some country guys that that might make a TV show out of it. Yeah.
I think most people that would get that close enough would go ahead and finish the pig off. They don't have any natural predator. They have no natural predators. They offer nothing to the ecosystem. They're just a drain and a drag on the economy. They cause tremendous amount of damage. And it's something that, frankly, I think would be worth the state to invest in. But this is my last year in the House. It's a limited session. I'm not sure if I want to waste a bill on something that probably won't pass. So I've got to run it by more of my colleagues to see if I think I could get it passed. I did run it by the chairman of the committee it would go through, who said, absolutely, it'll come out of our committee, but it'll die in appropriations. Because somebody's got to pay the $5.
Right, exactly.
Is it going to come out of Jack Monte's? Well, it could come out of Jack Monte's budget at Wildlife and Fisheries, or it could come out of Mike Strain's and Ag. I don't know, and they both agree it would be fine if the other guy paid for it. So where the money's going to come from is something that we have to figure out.
Well, like you said, I mean, if the farmers might want to contribute to that. Well, is that all the legislation ideas you got for this next coming session?
No, there's a lot of very technical a
The fiscal
limitation of
stuff.
liability bills. There's some civil law stuff trying to tweak around the edges of tort reform. There's a couple of things like that that fairly technical legal mumbo jumbo I won't bore you with, but there's always some playing around the edges and some cleanup. But as far
Are
as big ticket items, that's probably it.
Is when you talk about cleanup and rounding off the edges, I mean, isn't this some of the problem with government and the laws and legislation in our country overall, not just in Louisiana? All these laws through the years keep getting added on and stacked on top of each other, and now before you know it, you've got these because of this law, we now have this problem, and because of this combination of laws, there's now this problem. Isn't it time to be able to? I mean, is all this creation of new laws that creates bigger problems? Isn't there a way to unravel it? Don't you think that at some point, either on a federal level or state level, we got to start unraveling some of this stuff?
Yeah, well, very rarely do we actually create new laws. I mean, very rarely. Maybe once every 2 years or so, you'll see a bill that's 40 pages of new text, new statute. Almost, I'd say 99% of what we do is tweaking, deleting, amending current existing laws. So, and I give you a good example. I had a constituent call this morning that one of the bills that was pre-filed, well, I'll go ahead and tell you, by Nikki Muscarella. She called you, this is terrible bill. And she was all bent out of shape. And she didn't tell me Nikki had filed it. She said, I just read this bill and it's terrible. And I said, I can tell you right now, just the way you described it, that was Nikki Muscarella's bill, and it's not terrible. It's simply putting the law in a very specific area back to where it was 2 years ago, because we changed it and we went a little bit too far. And we created a problem with confirmation of faults in divorces. Robbie Carter had a bill that I amend, and we helped get it through. And yes, Robbie and I did work together. We do that occasionally. We don't agree on much, but on this issue, we agreed, and we got the bill through, and it tweaked how Louisiana handles confirmations of default, but we went a little bit too far and made it more difficult in divorce court. So Nikki's bringing a bill that is rolling it back about 2% of what we did. And I think it's good cleanup legislation. One of the things that you can't do, it's a bad idea to do, is pass a bill and forget about it. You've got to look and see if that bill actually has an effect on people. How does it affect them? And then, and almost everything needs to get tweaked. And the vast majority of what we do is tweaking things that were passed recently or sometimes a long time ago. Very rarely do we create new areas of law out of whole cloth. Very rarely. It's almost always redefining or classifying or revising things that are currently in the books.
I do kind of like the Trump policy, where for every law that's got to be created, one's got to be taken away. Maybe we can practice that in Louisiana.
That would be
and slowly
great.
unravel it.
Yeah, for every regulation that you put on an industry or a business, you have to take 2 away. That's a great idea. If it's that important, which 2 are you willing to get rid of? One of the problems, once you start a government bureaucracy, it almost never gets smaller. And once you start down the path of regulating business, very rarely do they roll those regulations back. Most of the time you're adding more regulation onto the existing regulation. So that's one of the problems that we have as a state and as a country, is government has gotten too big. It's reached into too deeply into too many of our pockets, and government has become an inhibitor of freedom. And one of the main reasons that I ran for office is to protect freedom. As a lawyer, one of the things that I did, Congressman Mike Johnson worked for that was Alliance Defense Fund and Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a Christian legal organization that defended religious liberty around the country. Well, he worked for him. I volunteered. I handled those types of cases on a volunteer basis, protecting liberty and protecting freedom, usually religious freedom, but all freedom and all liberty. And those are things that government can't move away from. Can't lose sight of when you're trying to do a regulation. Are you stepping on anybody's toes? Are you increasing the burden on somebody else, and are you decreasing liberty and freedom? And if that's the case, then we probably don't need to do it. So I do think we need to stop, look at where we are, and start rolling back some of these inhibitors of freedom, both at the state and the federal level.
I'm liking you even more now that I hear about your passion for freedom and liberty. It's what's happening on our federal level. These bureaucracies are creating, they're growing and they're circumventing the Constitution because they're creating laws, rules, regulations, and policies without going through the congressional process. So what do you think in Louisiana? I'm going to come back to the national level here in just a second, or just a minute rather. But what do you think are the major problems that Louisiana is faced with? I think we're at a turning point in Louisiana. We're watching other states around us grow in population and opportunity and in freedom, while we're watching Louisiana lose population, more of a tax burden on the individual, less freedom. What do you think are the major problems that we need to tackle in Louisiana to fix some of that?
All right, big picture standpoint, it's got to start with taxes. When you're the only southern state, more people are moving out of than moving into. The reason is jobs. I have 4 adult children. One lives in Dallas. The other one is moving to Dallas in about 2 weeks. So 2 are still in Louisiana. It's jobs. The reason is jobs. It's economic opportunity. Every state the U.S. federal government treats businesses the same regardless of what state you're in, but the states treat businesses differently, and the jobs are going to go to the states that treat the businesses better from a tax standpoint. Taxes and regulation is the best way to attract business. And if you look, all you got to do is look around the country. States that decided that they were going to try to overburden and squeeze every penny they could out of businesses, like California, New York.
That's your phone call. Your phone rang again.
Am I back?
There you go.
Sorry about that. I got
you're back. Oh, it's all right. It's all right.
States that overburden business are losing businesses. Businesses are going to move to the state that treats them better from a tax standpoint. And the jobs are going to move with the business, and the people are going to move with the jobs. So if you want people moving into your state instead of out of it, you need to focus on job creation. And the best way to do that is to look at the state's tax structure, personal and corporate income taxes, but you've also got to look at things like the inventory tax, the franchise tax, and everything else that works as a burden to business, as a disincentive for a business to move to Louisiana. That is first and foremost. And that's going to be a tough fight, but that's what we have to do to get Louisiana back on par. Our income tax is out of whack with the rest of the state. As I sit here right now in my house, I'm 20 miles from Texas, where there's 0 income tax. Louisiana just simply can't compete with that. So we've got to put ourselves in that arena with Texas, Tennessee, and Florida with no income tax, with North Carolina with much lower income tax. Even Mississippi and Arkansas are lowering their income tax and trying to move away from income tax completely. We're not far from being the only southern state with a significant income tax, and that just doesn't work. So, in addition to the tax, you've also got the overburdening regulation that Louisiana places, and the litigation environment is another thing that chases businesses out of state. So we've got to become a business-friendly state. We've got to work within the infrastructure we have to, in some cases, tweak it, in some cases, a massive overhaul if we're going to say Louisiana is open for business. Because, we've all seen the statistics of people going around the state. And 100 years ago, Louisiana was bigger than Florida. We had the same number of congressmen, but we had a bigger population than the state of Florida. They've grown. I think they've gone. We both had 8 congressmen. I think they're up to 22. And we're back to 6. So, they did some things right. We did some things wrong. And
it's
those
also
problems are fixable. Say that again.
It sounds like. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't hear your question.
But I said it sounds like common sense to be able. Look what other states are doing. They're doing this. They're no income tax, and they've changed their whole structure, and they're succeeding. Why is that Louisiana doesn't do that? What is holding back our elected officials from doing that? What underground? I mean, is Huey Long coming out of the grave and going to the governor's office every day and going veto, veto, veto? What is it?
I don't know, but it's something that's systemically a problem. And one of the most poignant stories, and this is verified, in the 70s, Disney, their first choice for Disney World was the North Shore. Did you know
Yeah,
that? Their
yeah,
first
yeah.
choice for Disney World was the North Shore. The problem is all the Louisiana politicians said, what can you give me? What are you going to give us? Whereas when they went to Florida, Florida said, what can we give you? What can we do for you to make this easier? Louisiana said, what are you going to give us? What's in it for us? And Disney
Right.
said, the heck with this. I'm going to go where Florida opened the books and, rolled out the red carpet, everything that they could to get them there, and just look at what Orlando's become. That was the short-sighted nature of Louisiana politics in a nutshell. We chased Disney away.
Yeah.
And it's been like that from the beginning. It could be the ghost of Huey. I don't think the ghost of Edwin and John Bell Edwards is too much better. Trying to extract every ounce of every penny that you can get out of not only business but individuals. Look at the Office of Motor Vehicles. I can't tell you how many times I get calls from constituents who say, I moved to Texas and I got insurance with a Texas company for 2 years, and then I moved back to Louisiana. And Louisiana says, oh, you didn't have insurance, so we suspend your license and you got this big fine. And they bring them the paperwork and they say the vehicle was never uninsured. It was just insured with a Texas company, and they don't care. And they're having these huge fines. And I mean, I get one of those calls a week or one every 2 weeks from a constituent that's having a problem with the Office of Motor Vehicles, a constituent who didn't break the rules. The vehicle was registered in Louisiana and it was always insured. But Louisiana, the OMV doesn't accept how it was sent to them. I had another one where the insurance company got the name of the business wrong. It was I'm not going to tell you the name, but it was blank drilling service. And the insurance company issued the policy to blank drilling and son. And OMV said, nope, name doesn't match. You were uninsured. Well, the insurance company actually issued an affidavit that said the vehicles were insured the entire time. There was never 1 minute that they were uninsured. And the owner of the business ended up having to pay $14,000 just to get the state, because they wouldn't renew the license plates or the registration for any of their vehicles. They were literally holding them hostage. And that's wrong. And what it is, it's ever since John Bell's been there, it's an absolute attack on business, attack on people who do business, attack on taxpayers, attack on the people who live here. Everything that they can do to extract every penny out of a person who has one and give it to government. And one of my philosophies when I'm looking at legislation is, if you're trying to raise a tax, whether it's a fee or a tax or a fine, the question is, does the government need that dollar more than the person who earned it? And unless you can convince me that the person who went out and created a business or created a job or went to work for somebody else and provided a service, that person doesn't deserve the dollar, and that the state government really, really needs it more than the person who earned it, I might consider voting for a tax increase. But I've yet to see that burden. I've yet to have anybody convince me that burden was out there. Because, I mean, if you go out and earn a dollar, in my opinion, that's your dollar. I've actually had people at the Department of Revenue say the state allows you to keep a percentage of your paycheck. That's not how it works. The paycheck belongs to the worker. It belongs to the person who earned it. And then the government can come get it, but it is not the government allowing you to keep some of your money. That is your money. If you earned it, it's yours. The government can tax it, and we can fight that. And that's a different fight, but they're not allowing you to keep it.
It's unbelievable, like as you point out, how many of these I should say problems, I guess a little bit too broad. But when you look at this and how much it's going to take to unwrangle all this, and the question still comes to my mind, though. These are these people that work in these agencies that create these errors or create these problems or create these rules. They live amongst us. I mean, these are people that want their freedom. These are people that, even elected officials that run on the concept of freedom and less taxes, but yet we still see these burdensome laws. We still see this red tape. We still see this just quagmire of just it's a swamp. And I don't mean the swamp like they talk about in DC, or the swamp where in Louisiana, but it just creates a murky, muddy mess to navigate, just to be able to survive and prosper. How do we unwind all this?
Well, yeah, that's systemic in the nature of the beast and the way the legislature works. One of the most frustrating time periods to me was 16, 17, 18, John Bell's first 3 years, where it was attempts after attempt after attempt to raise taxes. And one of the questions people would come to, and these are, sometimes Republican, seemingly conservative legislators were coming with, hey, we can raise this. If we do this, we can raise this tax. We can. And at some point in the process, I realized that they were asking the wrong question. They were asking, can we raise the tax? The question should be, should we raise the tax?
Thank you.
You don't necessarily look at it and say, okay, this would be real easy for us to reduce this credit. We can reduce the credit. Yeah, we certainly can. The question is, should we? And I think that question doesn't get asked enough, because the bottom line is government does harm. Government harms its businesses. Government harms its constituents. Government harms taxpayers. Government harms law-abiding citizens. And we shouldn't. And that's one of the things that I try to keep in mind, is one of my number one roles as a legislator is, how can I get government out of the pocket of taxpayers? How can I get government burden and regulation off of people's backs? And how can I get government to work for people? I mean, the bottom line is government's supposed to do things like pave the roads and protect you from crime, prosecute the bad guy, and incarcerate him. That's what government is supposed to do. We forget that role, and sometimes people want to expand the role of government and forget about what government is there for. We don't work for the government. The government works for us. And too many people lose focus of that paradigm. And the bottom line is, we created the state government. The states created the federal government, not the other way around.
That's right. It's almost like we talked about earlier. I met so many elected officials, and you talked about one-on-one basis, and they're all about freedom, liberty, lower taxes, doing the right thing. And then you see what bills are coming out of the legislature and out of the Senate. It's almost like that mob mentality takes over, and you go, well, wait a minute, where did common sense go? We get this bigger, and we have a bigger mess. So speaking of which, one of my questions I love to ask on my show is about freedom and liberty, of course. But I think that our freedoms and liberties, we're losing them all over the country. We're losing them federally, we're losing them on a state level. In what freedoms and liberties do you feel are most under attack in America, and of course Louisiana? How is it, and how they're connected?
Under attack, but we're winning on Second Amendment. Gun ownership, freedom of gun ownership, and constitutional carry and things along that line is absolutely under attack. But that's one in which we're keeping our head above water. The bottom line is, the text of the Constitution is very much on our side in that. And these gun grabbing states and gun grabbing legislations is being ruled unconstitutional regularly at the federal level. Bad anti-gun ownership, the pro-gun control bills don't make it through the legislature, but we have to be diligent. They've come very, very close to passing some of these red flag laws, which largely were just ruled unconstitutional, where you can take somebody's guns away because you think they might commit a crime at some point in the future. You just can't do that. That's not the way the rule of law works. So that's something that we have to be diligent and that we have to fight for. And that's something that's on the front end. That again, we see every day. All those bills come through criminal justice, and there's always the egregious example of the bad guy who disregarded the law and did something that he shouldn't. And people think, or they want to make the argument, if it was we know it was illegal to shoot people, but if it was really, really illegal to carry a gun in that particular store, then the bad guy wouldn't have brought the gun into the store. Well, that's ridiculous. It's illegal to shoot people.
Yeah.
So
I've never heard it put that way. I like that unique way of putting it.
Well, I mean, it's a wrong-headed way of looking at it, where, saying you can't have a gun at school. Fine, I can understand where you're coming from, but saying no guns at school, all that means is law-abiding people aren't going to have guns at school. The bad guy who wants to shoot people is ignoring the much bigger law that says you can't shoot people. So you think he's going to have a problem with the little minuscule regulation that says this is a gun-free zone? It's a ridiculous argument, and it's a ridiculous logical paradigm. So from that standpoint, that's what I'm very passionate about, is protecting Second Amendment rights, protecting the right to carry, protecting your right to defend yourself. The antithesis to that is now in some of these jurisdictions where you have woke prosecutors, they're starting to prosecute the victim of the self-defense guy who gets attacked. Uses Kyle Rittenhouse. It's a good example. There are Kyle Rittenhouses all over the country where somebody lawfully is lawfully carrying a gun, is lawfully attacked, is very logically in danger for his life, uses the weapon to protect himself, and still gets prosecuted. That shouldn't happen in the United States of America.
Exactly right. I agree 100%. I talked to Danny McCormick earlier. We were talking about guns. Of course, it's all our favorite subjects just about, but there's a lot of states. And now, of course, in Louisiana, we have parishes, but other states have counties. I always make the distinction. I have a lot of national listeners, but there's a lot of states and a lot of counties that are becoming sanctuary states, sanctuary counties, or they're passing these parallel laws, that basically say that, that the local sheriffs will not enforce, a federal law on its local citizens, i.e. being able to use the 10th Amendment. How do you feel about that type of legislation in Louisiana?
Well, it depends on which way you're trying to go with it. Like Larry Freeman brings a sanctuary state bill that says Louisiana state officials are not allowed. Louisiana state police are not allowed to enforce the federal gun laws. So on that respect, if that's what you're talking about, I do support that bill, simply because if the federal government is going to pass unconstitutional, illegal gun restriction, gun control laws that overstep the Second Amendment, the state of Louisiana is not going to help you enforce those laws. That's a good bill. On the flip side, what I think you were talking about is some of the sanctuary, whether it's illegals or whether it's drugs or along prostitution.
No, that's not what I mean at all. Right.
Which one were you talking about, Larry, or
the first one? The first one.
Okay, you were talking. I wasn't sure if you were talking about the old.
Yeah.
Because the original sanctuary cities, where we're not going to prosecute certain offenses, we're not going to round up illegals, and we're not going to enforce certain immigration laws, and that was the original sanctuary city. So what Larry's trying to do is say we can't affect federal law at the state level, but we're not saying the FBI and the feds can't come in and enforce their laws. What we are saying is that local deputies, local police are not going to help them.
Right. They're not going to be going knocking on the doors, hold their hand and bring it to the front door. Oh yeah, John Doe lives right here. You want John Doe, you go get John Doe. I absolutely. That's the sanctuary I was talking about. Yeah. And although I did an interview a couple weeks ago with an attorney in Georgia who is looking for ways to restore gun rights for some criminals based on what they were charged of before. And so there's always some people who are on both sides of the fence trying to expand gun rights for everybody depending on their crimes, in the past. But that's not the sanctuary I'm talking about. I'm talking about, like I said, protecting gun rights using that 10th Amendment, which a lot of people forget about how important our 10th Amendment is, because now you're bringing power back to people on a more local level to be able to protect all of our rights in such a way that you can tell the government, hey, guess what? We got the 10th Amendment. You can't touch it.
the 10th Amendment is largely the forgotten amendment because the growth of the federal government has gotten so out of control. The bottom line is the federal government has no power to do anything unless it's specifically listed in the Constitution. And the 10th Amendment specifically says if it's not specifically given to the federal government somewhere in the Constitution, then it's retained to the states. So the states, who were the original powers who created the federal government, they have plenary power to do whatever they want unless it is inhibited by the state constitution or the federal, unless it's one of the delegated powers. But what has happened slowly over time, starting with Marbury versus Madison and going all the way up to the present day, is the federal government has pushed the limit and pushed the boundary of what it can do, and and further and further pushing the states to a more secondary role. And the states are not secondary. So
they're primary, and what's happened through the years, just like the bureaucracies had increased their power and circumvented the Constitution, the federal government has usurped its power by doling out the dollars. Hey, states create this law and you get the federal money, but now after you create the law, you're tied to us, you're tethered to us, and have to follow our rules, just like the Board of Education. Now we're so tied to it, there's no way to break away from it, pretty much, without the schools failing.
That was the exact example that I was thinking of. You can make a really good argument that should not be a U.S. Department of Education, because all the schools are state and local. And so, I mean, and all of the power that they wield over education in this country is the power of the purse. If you don't do it our way, we're not going to fund your roads, or we're not going to help you in some way that involves holding back money. While that's not unconstitutional, it's wrong. And it's a backdoor way of expanding federal government power. In Louisiana, the ones that, whether it's the seatbelt law or raising the drinking age from 18 to 21, those are all federal bribery. That was bribery. If you don't do this, we're going to take your funding away. And the fact of the matter is, if you look at, 2/3 to 3/4 of the money that the state of Louisiana has comes from the federal government.
That's right.
The tax dollars produced in the state is a fairly small percentage of the overall state budget. So the money of the money that gets spent within the in the budget, well under half is actually state produced dollars. The money comes from the Fed. And so
that's amazing. So about half or more of our money, our state is funded by 50% or more by the federal government, which shows how much control it has, how much it's trying to take over on us, and how much our 10th Amendment's being encroached on. Maybe two last questions, and then we'll wrap up. What about education? Do you have any thoughts on education?
I do have a lot of thoughts on education. I've not been on the education committee in several years. I started out there. I was there when the education reform was passed in 2012, under the first year of Bobby Jindal's second term, that opened school choice up a little bit and help with charter schools. And it was a good step. We have a lot that we need to do. I think the biggest thing right now is education savings account and having the money follow the student. Put your money in your mouth. If you want to attract students, go ahead.
Well, now I like that idea, but I'm sorry to interrupt you so quick on that one, because I was excited to say that may be another way to help cut the ties from the federal government on the Department of Education. If more states started letting the students' tax dollars follow the child, and we start seeing more people homeschooling, more people having school choice, then you see that freedom dismantles some of the way the systems are set up.
Well, there are right ways to spend money, and there are wasteful ways to spend money. One of the best examples in Louisiana is the independent school districts in East Baton Rouge Parish, Central and Zachary. My father-in-law was on the school board in Central from the day it was created until fairly recently. And they came out. I don't know if you've been to Central High School, but if you haven't seen it, I recommend you go look at it. It was what they did. They created it out of whole cloth. I mean, those school districts were created in the last 15 years and maybe 20, but I think 15. They created them and they put the money in the classroom. And when they put the money in the classroom, what they eliminated was the bureaucracy. They eliminated the central office. They eliminated the bureaucracy. So the money went to the classroom. Go look at Central High School and go look at Zachary. They're beautiful. They look like college campuses. They have the best of everything. And that's right there in East Baton Rouge Parish because they put the money in the classroom. They didn't use it to fund a central office bureaucracy. They used it to fund the classroom. And there's right ways to spend money in education, and there's wrong ways. And what's happened in Central specifically, I can't speak to Zachary, but I have family in Central.
Right.
Their property values doubled within the first couple of years of creating their independent school district. And they're in the process. Since then, they've doubled again. So their property values are higher. Their home values are higher. Their schools are absolutely fantastic.
Right.
And it's what they did was very, very simple. East Baton Rouge Parish was a huge school system, and some parts of it were getting more attention than others.
Right.
So they had to incorporate the city of Central, and they created a school district. And what was interesting about that is prior to that bill passing, the parents were calling East Baton Rouge and saying, we need you to fix this. We need you to fix that. There were problems with the school, but that passed on a Saturday. The next morning, the parents, for the first time, actually owned that school. So they showed up with paint buckets and screwdrivers and hammers and got to work fixing it themselves. Because the first time, it wasn't the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board's school and whose responsibility to fix it was theirs. So they showed up and they fixed it themselves and they painted it themselves. And then they raised the tax dollars and they built the most beautiful high school in the state of Louisiana that I've seen. And
It's
they did
amazing.
it using public dollars, public tax dollars. They did it by spending the money the right way. So the evidence of how to do good, effective public education is sitting right there in East Baton Rouge Parish.
I'm glad you put that on my radar. I'm going to go do that. Ascension Parish, you said, right?
No, Central, and it's in East Baton Rouge Parish.
Central in what parish?
Central is a city in East Baton Rouge Parish.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, I was just clarifying like that. That's amazing. I'm gonna have to go talk to them about that.
Yeah, go take the tour of the school. It's absolutely beautiful. And I've heard that Zachary is just as nice. I just haven't seen it. Again, my father-in-law was on the school board in Central. Shout out to Jim Gardner. He played football for LSU back in the 50s and reformed the Central school system. So we'll give him a shout out. He gave me a tour of the school, and it's absolutely beautiful. And he rotated off the school board. He did not run for re-election last year. So it's
amazing. I love the fact that the people took control, because all too often we're hearing of these school boards that aren't doing the right thing by the kids. You know, they're basically funneling money from the coffers of the Department of Education into the hands of architects and contractors who just want to build more schools or renovate more schools. And in this case, the parents got involved and they did a lot of good and made the schools better for the students. I love that.
Yeah. But it took it took an entire community working together. And the fact is, when you own it and your entire community is working together, good things happen even in Louisiana. So the fact of the matter is, we can fix things. We've just got to all work together. We got to all row the same direction. We got to get focused on the same goal. And we have to acknowledge what our problems are. And we have to be real about what our problems are. And so, you look at it from that perspective, there are success stories right here in Louisiana.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for pointing that out. But Representative Seabough, thank you so much for spending so much time with me today and for the people of Louisiana, because I think that a lot of the things that you pointed out today are really going to be ways to motivate a lot more people to get involved. You gave a lot of good ideas, a lot of good answers, a lot of good solutions. And I can't thank you enough. I got to tell you, I kind of expected a good interview like this because, I've witnessed firsthand how good you are in the legislature, how effective you are and how respected you are. And I'm glad that translated over into a good interview like this. I think the people will be happy to share it.
Well, thank you for saying that. I really appreciate you.
Well, any final words?
And I just look, we got the session coming up here in a couple of weeks. There's some big changes coming. It's an election year. And look, in 2007, when Bobby Jindal was elected, it was the first time that we had an ideological shift in the legislature. There were more Republicans elected. Democrats were still a majority in both houses, but there were more Republicans elected, and there was an ideological shift when Bobby Jindal was elected. The impetus was there, the momentum was there to actually fix the state of Louisiana in 2008 after the 2007 elections. The Bobby Jindal administration was the worst case of political malpractice in my lifetime. They completely wasted the goodwill and wasted the momentum. But we're potentially there again. We're going to finally be rid of John Bell. We're going to finally, hopefully, have a conservative Republican governor. We're going to have huge Republican majorities in both houses. This election could be Louisiana's time if we don't mess it up. If we elect a good conservative Republican governor and we elect good conservative Republican legislators who go to Baton Rouge with the right idea, with the right incentive, and work together and row the same direction, we can stop being last, and we can stop being the only state that more people are moving out of than into. And we can fix these problems, but we better do it now. I mean, Jindal really wasted the opportunity, and we've had 8 years of backsliding under John Bell. We've got problems we can fix, and we've got to step up and fix them. I think the way I see the electorate shaping up, we're really, really close to sending that governor and legislatures to Baton Rouge that's ready to step up and actually make some of these tough choices, make some generational changes, and fix things so that our kids and grandkids aren't moving out of Louisiana. They can find good, high-paying, quality jobs right here at home, which is what we need. And that's going to turn into better roads, better schools, and less crime, and everything else that we need to be focusing on. And we're there.
More freedom, more liberty.
Potential is there.
And more freedom and liberty.
More freedom
and
and less government regulation.
And maybe we'll get your two daughters back in town.
Well, let's hope. And again, I don't want to have to travel to Dallas to visit my grandkids.
I love it. Or pick them up from school.
I would love to pick them up from school.
I love it. Well, hang on one second while I close out the show, and I'm going to talk to you after I close out the show. Thank you again for all your time. Everybody else, please, thank you for your time. And please check in Representative Alan Seabaugh more. Keep an eye on the great things that he's doing. You'll find that this interview is up on Rumble. It'll be up on YouTube. The audio will be a podcast on a podcast playlist. You'll be able to see it on and hear it on all these platforms. And please share it with somebody that feels that Louisiana needs to be turned in the right direction. And this is somebody that can do it. Thank you, guys. You have a great day.